My brother got the business my father built. I got a voicemail telling me about it. Not a conversation, not a sit-down. A voicemail 43 seconds long, recorded on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was on my lunch break eating a sandwich at my desk. My dad's voice, cheerful almost, like he was leaving me a reminder about Sunday dinner. "Sweetheart, your brother and I have been talking, and we think it makes the most sense for him to take over the shop. You understand. You've always understood these things better than anyone." I sat there with half a sandwich in my hand and replayed it twice. My brother, who hadn't set foot inside that shop in 6 years. My brother, who moved to Scottsdale with his wife, chased real estate deals that never closed, borrowed money he never returned, and called home when he needed something. That brother. He got the business. I put down the sandwich and didn't finish it. Let me back up, because none of this lands right without knowing what that shop actually was. My father opened Kellerman's Auto and Tire on Route 9 in 1991, the year before I was born. By the time I was old enough to sweep the waiting room floor, I was doing it. Not because anyone made me. Because I loved being there. The smell of motor oil and concrete dust. The radio my dad kept tuned to classic rock. The way the bay doors let in cold air in winter, and the guys wore those zip-up fleece vests over their uniforms. It felt like a real place. Solid. Something you could put your hands on. My brother never felt that way about it. He tolerated the shop, the way you tolerate a family obligation. Present enough to avoid conflict, absent enough to make clear where his interest actually lived. He left for college in Phoenix at 18 and came back for holidays and funerals. My dad never pushed him. He pushed me instead because I was there, and I was good at it, and somewhere along the way that became the arrangement nobody bothered to name. By 26, I was running the books. By 29, I was scheduling staff, ordering parts, handling the insurance renewals, fielding the vendor calls my dad hated. I didn't ask for a title or a raise commensurate with the work. I just did it, the way you do things when you love something, and you believe the people around you see that love and will honor it eventually. I believed that for a long time. The voicemails came 3 weeks after my dad's cardiac episode. He was fine. Is fine. But it scared everyone enough that he started talking about the future in concrete terms for the first time. What happens to the house? What happens to the shop? What happens when? I thought those conversations were happening with me. I was at the hospital every day. I brought him his crossword books and his decaf and sat with him while my brother sent flowers Arizona with a card that said, "Thinking of you, hang tight." I should have known something was shifting when my dad started taking calls in the hallway. The voicemail arrived on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I had a meeting with the family attorney, a man named Aldous, who had represented my father for 20 years and looked uncomfortable the whole time we were in his office. The paperwork was already drawn up. My brother's name on the operating agreement, a buyout clause that would pay me a small sum in installments over 5 years, described in the document as compensation for prior service contributions. Not partnership, not equity. Compensation. Like I'd been a contractor they were settling with. I read every page. Aldous kept clearing his throat. When I looked up, I said, "Did my father write this? Or did my brother?" He cleared his throat again. They collaborated. I nodded, folded the papers, slid them back across the desk, and said I'd be in touch. I drove back to the shop on autopilot. It was a Thursday afternoon in late October, the kind of day where the light turns golden thin by 4 o'clock, and everything looks prettier than it is. I parked in my usual spot, the one in the back, by the recycling bins that I'd claimed years ago, because the closer spots should go to customers. I sat in the car for a while. The bay doors were open. I could hear the air compressor cycling and someone's radio. I'd spent 12 years of my adult life inside those walls. I didn't go in. I drove home. That night I didn't call my dad. I didn't text my brother. I sat on my couch with a glass of water and tried to locate the feeling that was supposed to be there. The anger, the tears, something loud and proportionate to what had happened. Instead, I felt something quieter and colder. Like the moment after you step off a curb you didn't see coming. Not pain yet, just the sudden awareness that the ground was not where you expected it to be. I opened my laptop and started a document. I titled it what I actually did. Then I started writing. Not a complaint, not a letter to anyone, just a record. The first inventory order I'd renegotiated in 2017, saving us 11%. The insurance audit I handled in 2019 that caught a billing error worth $4,000. The 3 staff members I'd hired and trained who were still there. The vendor relationships I'd built over a decade, where they knew my voice on the phone before I gave my name. Every system, every process, everything inside that shop that ran because I had built it or maintained it or both. I wrote for 2 hours. At the end, I had 6 pages. I saved the document, closed the laptop, and went to bed. I didn't cancel my direct deposit to the shop's operational account that week. I'd been running payroll from it for years, my own modest salary blended in with everyone else's. I kept going in. I kept doing my job. Because the thing about being the person who holds things together is that you don't know how to stop midway through. Even when you've just found out that the thing you've been holding together was never going to be yours. My brother flew in that weekend. I didn't know he was coming until my dad texted me Saturday morning, "Your brother's here. Dinner tonight, 6 o'clock. I went. I don't know why, except that not going felt like giving something up, and I hadn't decided yet what I was and wasn't giving up. My brother was tanned from Arizona. He looked healthy and relaxed in that specific way that people who are being supported by other people's labor often look. He hugged me at the door, said I looked great, asked about my apartment. My dad was in good spirits, moving around the kitchen slowly, that new careful walk he'd had since the hospital. My mother had made her pot roast, the one that takes all day. The table looked like a normal family dinner. Halfway through the meal, my brother said he was excited to dig into the business side of things. He said he had ideas. He mentioned digital marketing, an app for scheduling appointments, partnerships with fleet companies. He said it like he was pitching something. He looked at my dad, who nodded. He looked at me, briefly, then away. I put down my fork. "What's your plan for parts procurement?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "We have 4 primary vendors. One of them has a net 60 payment arrangement I negotiated personally. If you don't maintain that relationship specifically, they'll revert to net 30, which will affect cash flow significantly in the first quarter." There was a pause. "We can figure that stuff out," he said. "I know," I said. "I was just asking if you had a plan." My mother looked at my dad. My dad looked at the pot roast. My brother said he was sure there'd be a learning curve, but he was committed to the process. I picked my fork back up. I didn't say anything else for the rest of dinner. On the drive home, I kept my hands at 10 and 2 and focused on the road. There was no dramatic internal monologue, no radio, just the sound of the engine and the streetlights going by. When I got home, I opened my laptop, went back to the document I'd been building, and added the vendor situation in writing. Specific names, specific terms, specific dollar amounts, not for anyone else. Just so the record was complete. The next 10 days unfolded, in a way I can only describe as my family deciding that my silence meant acceptance. My mother called to tell me my brother was going to need my help during the transition. She used the word transition, the way people use words when they want to make something that benefits them sound generous toward you. She said I knew the shop better than anyone, and it would really help to have me there for him. I told her I had some things to think about. She said, "Of course. Take your time. We all know this is a lot, but we also know you want what's best for the business." What's best for the business? As if the business were a separate entity that existed independently of the person who had been quietly operating it for the past decade. My brother texted me that week asking if I could send him the vendor contacts. "Just a list," he said. "Quick thing." I read the message and set my phone face down on the counter. 2 days later, he texted again. "Hey, also the password for the scheduling software? And whoever does the insurance." "Aldous said you handle that. I'll need the agent's name." I sat with that text for a long time. What I felt wasn't anger, exactly. It was something cleaner. A specific kind of clarity that arrives when you realize the people around you have been treating you like infrastructure, not family, not partner. Infrastructure. The pipes in the wall that make the house livable. You don't think about pipes until something goes wrong, and then you want them fixed immediately, and then once they're fixed, you go back to not thinking about them. I had been the pipes. I typed back, "I'm going to need some time to think about my role going forward. I'll be in touch." He didn't respond that night. The next morning, I had a missed call from my dad. I called him back on my lunch break, standing in the parking lot behind my office building, watching a pigeon investigate a wrapper near the dumpster. My dad answered on the second ring. He sounded tired. "Sweetheart," he said, "your brother said you're not being cooperative." I said I needed time to think about my role. That's not the same as not being cooperative. He's trying to get up to speed. He needs what you know. I understand that, I said. And I'm thinking about how that looks going forward, what it means for me. There was a pause. Then my dad said something I have replayed more times than I want to admit. He said, "You've always been the one we didn't have to worry about." I stood in that parking lot and let the wind move past me. "That's not a compliment, Dad," I said. And I meant it quietly, not as an attack, just as a fact I was naming for the first time. "That just means I was the one you took for granted." He didn't respond to that. He said he hoped I'd come around, and that family was more important than business decisions. I told him I loved him and said I had to get back to work. I meant both things. That afternoon, I reached out to a business attorney. Not Aldous, my own. A woman named Brecker, whose name I'd gotten from a colleague 2 years ago and saved in my contacts under the optimistic label just in case. I sent her an email outlining the situation and attaching the document I'd been building. She responded within 24 hours, and we scheduled a call for Thursday morning. The call lasted 40 minutes. She was straightforward. She said the buyout terms as written were low, possibly significantly below fair market value, given my demonstrable contribution to the shop's operations. She said she'd need the full financials to make a proper assessment. But her initial read was that there was room to negotiate. She asked if I wanted to pursue a counterclaim to the operating agreement. I told her I wasn't sure yet. I needed a week. During that week, 2 things happened. The first was a conversation with my aunt, my dad's younger sister, who called me on a Wednesday evening out of nowhere. She's always been practical, the kind of person who says the quiet parts plainly. She'd heard about the arrangement through whatever channel families use to transmit news without anyone officially announcing anything. She asked me how I was doing. I said I was thinking. She said, "You know, your father loves both of you, but he's always believed your brother needed more help." I asked what that meant. She said, "It means he thought you'd be fine either way." He was probably right, but it wasn't fair to act like that's the same as not needing anything. She was the first person to say out loud that it wasn't fair. I had to put the phone down for a second when she said it. The second thing was something I saw on my brother's Instagram, a reel he'd posted of himself standing in front of the shop, the bay doors open behind him, captioned "New Chapter Begins." Grateful for the legacy and ready to build on it. There were 60-something comments. "Congratulations. So proud of you. Your dad must be so happy. This is your time." People from high school. People from Scottsdale. A few family friends. No mention of how the legacy got to the point where it was worth building on. I screenshotted it, added it to my folder, and called Brecker back the next morning. We filed the counterclaim on the operating agreement 11 days later. I also sent a formal written notice to the shop's primary bank, removing my name as an authorized signatory on the operational account, and contacted our insurance agent to notify them I would no longer be the named point of contact on the business policy. I sent the parts vendor, the one with the net 60 arrangement, a brief note saying the account contact was changing and recommending they confirm terms directly with the new operator before the next billing cycle. My brother called that same afternoon, angrier than I'd ever heard him. He said I was blowing up the family over money. He said Dad was stressed, Mom was crying, and that I was being vindictive. He said, and I remember this clearly, "You act like you built that place from scratch. Dad built it. You just worked there." I let him finish. Then I said, "You're right that Dad built it. I'm not disputing that. I'm disputing what my contribution was worth, and I'm asking for that to be evaluated honestly." That's not vindictive. That's accurate. He hung up before I finished the sentence. For 3 weeks, I heard nothing from my parents directly. My brother sent a series of texts that moved through angry, then bargaining, then a long message at 11 on a Friday night that said, among other things, that he'd talked to Aldous and they were willing to increase the payout. He named a number. I forwarded it to Brecker without responding. During those 3 weeks, I found my footing in a strange way. My mornings were quieter. I slept better. I noticed I'd been holding tension in my shoulders for so long that when it released, I didn't recognize the absence of it immediately. I just noticed one day that my neck didn't ache when I woke up. Small things. The kind of physical accounting your body does when a weight has been lifted. Even if the weight was yours to carry for so long you'd stopped calling it heavy. I kept working. I had my own job, separate from the shop, a position at a regional logistics firm I'd taken years ago for stability, and kept because I was good at it. I was still there, still doing that. The shop had always been a second thing, an extra thing, a thing I did for love and family, and some idea I had about being valuable in a way that mattered to the people I came from. I had other ways of being valuable. That helped to remember. The settlement came in the form of a revised agreement, negotiated between Brecker and Aldous over several weeks. The final number was just under 3 times what they'd originally offered. Not what 12 years was worth in any real sense, but an acknowledgement that the original offer was not made in good faith, which was, in its way, what I had been asking for all along. I signed the papers on a Thursday morning, the same day of the week I'd gotten the original voicemail. I noticed that only because I write dates in my planner, and I'd been doing it long enough to recognize the pattern. 2 days after I signed, I got a text from my dad. Short. His texts are always short. Heard everything's settled. Hope we can put this behind us. I sat with that for a while. Then I typed back. I hope so too. I love you. I meant that too. Both parts of it. The hope and the love, and also the fact that I was not going to pretend the thing that happened didn't happen. Those 3 things can coexist. I've learned that. My brother and his wife moved back from Scottsdale to run the shop. I heard from my aunt that the first few months were rougher than expected. The net 60 vendor, as I had predicted, required renegotiation and did not extend the same terms to a new point of contact who had no existing relationship with them. A staff member left, one of the 3 I'd hired and trained. The scheduling software gave them trouble because no one knew where I'd documented the integration settings, because I had documented it in a folder on a hard drive I'd taken when I removed my things. I hadn't taken it out of spite. I took it because it was mine. The documentation was something I'd created on my own time, on my own computer, to make the business run more smoothly. That felt like a distinction worth maintaining. I ran into my dad at my aunt's birthday dinner in February, the first time I'd seen him since before everything. He was thinner, moving carefully still. He hugged me at the door, the way he always had, and held on a little longer than usual. Later in the evening, he found me in the kitchen while I was refilling my glass of water, and the rest of the party was loud in the other room. He looked at the window over the sink for a moment, not at me. Then he said, I thought I was making things easier, for everyone. I didn't say what I could have said. Instead, I said, I know. He nodded once, slowly. You were good at that place. I was, I agreed. We stood there for a moment in the kitchen, with the party noise coming through the wall, and then my aunt called for him from the living room, and he went. I finished my water and stood there for another minute. Good at that place. 12 years reduced to a compliment that came 12 months too late, delivered to a window above a kitchen sink. But he said it. I counted that. These days, my mornings are mine. I make coffee before 7, sit at the small table by the window in my apartment, and watch the neighborhood come awake. I teach a budgeting seminar twice a month at a community center nearby. Started it as a volunteer thing. Now they pay me a small stipend. The women who come are mostly working through transitions, divorce, job loss, inheriting something confusing they don't know how to manage. I know how to talk to all of them. I still have the folder on my hard drive. Not because I need it anymore, but because I made it, and it exists, and I don't believe in erasing your own work just because the chapter is closed. My brother called last month. Short conversation. He said he had a question about a vendor. I listened. I gave him the answer, because I knew it, and it wasn't complicated, and there was no good reason to withhold it. He said thanks. I said sure. We hung up. That's about where we are. Not repaired, not severed. Somewhere in the realistic middle, where most actual family things live, in the space between the story you were told about how things would go and the one you finally decided to live instead. I don't hold the roof up for anyone anymore. What I hold now is mine. My time, my work, my name on things I actually chose. It's quieter than I expected. Most mornings, that's exactly enough.